Yeah, I wrote my first book when I was 17, and it was terrible. It was meant to be burnt, set on fire. It was so bad. But you do get better every time you write something. And of all things, I think a lot of the creativity that I have, if I can be so bold to say that, is I have narcolepsy, which means that I am tired all the time. And even now, as I speak to you, I have to focus right now, right onto you, John, because if I don't, my mind starts to wander. And when they can seem as a bit of a negative, I describe it this way for people. I said, that moment where you're falling asleep and you get all those amazing creative ideas where you're between that sleep and wake world. You think that's I got to do that. That's an amazing idea. I'm going to write that down. Then you wake up in the morning and you don't remember it. You didn't write it down. You don't remember it anymore. Well,
Yeah.
I'm in that state about 80% of my day.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting from Prince George, British Columbia, and we are on the brink. And we have a special guest today, all the way from New Zealand, and his name is Dick Wybrow. Dick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and welcome to summer. I know it's probably a little bit chilly in British Columbia this time of year, so I'll bring a little bit of our warmth from this part of the world. Where today's actually one of the nicest days we're having in a long time. It's rained every single week, almost every single day. It feels like since January, and
That is
today
not
is
normal,
bright and
right?
sunny.
That's
No,
not
it's I don't
normal,
know.
right?
It's not. We had El Nino or El Nina or La Nina or
Right,
El Gordo. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, it brought a lot of rain. But
right.
today it's sunny and it's beautiful.
And you're in Auckland, New Zealand, which is the
Auckland, right?
capital of New Zealand, right?
It's the biggest city. Wellington is the capital.
Oh,
At one
Wellington
point,
is
some
right.
years ago, it was the capital. I believe, and then they moved it down to Wellington. There's talk every now and then about moving the capital up here to Auckland, but all the legislators have their nice homes down in Wellington now, so they don't think they
It's
want to
not
do
going to
that.
happen.
No.
So the interesting part is that where are you from originally?
So I am originally from Winnipeg,
Okay.
in Canada, Manitoba. I
Okay.
was there till I was 9, and then I moved to the U.S. And so I spent about 35 years in the United States, all over the country. I was in Minnesota and Texas and Missouri, in Florida twice. I was in California, in Georgia, so all over the place. A lot of that coming from my radio days, but also got a chance to see a lot of the country. And I love the United States. It's a beautiful country.
And then
Beautiful
all
people,
of a
too.
sudden, what happened is you decided to go to the other side of the world.
It wasn't my choice. It was the boss's choice.
Okay.
So, what we were looking at, I had been working for CNN for about a dozen years or so, which is probably about 10 years longer than one should. And I was ready to get out, and we were looking at retiring, or at least, the penultimate choice before retiring. So we were going to go to Colorado. And then after that, maybe go to New Zealand. And when you make those plans, one day we'll do this, it kind of feels like it's never going to happen. And I happened to be Googling around. I was doing some research, and I found out that my father is a New Zealander, and because of that, I have
Oh,
what's called citizenship by descent.
wow.
So all the tricky immigration about coming into the country, I got to kind of go around all that. And I went in the other room, and I told my wife, and I said, "Hey, it turns out I'm already a citizen." And without missing a beat, she goes, "Then why are we still here?" And that was
Wow.
October, and by January we were in country.
What
So
year?
that's yeah, 11 years ago this January.
Wow. And
We
so and then before that you were involved with one of the major news programs in the world being CNN.
Yeah. So I was at CNN. I did. I went because I made a transition from radio into television, and so I joined them, which was ludicrous. No television experience. Let's go with one of the largest networks in the world. That seems
Right.
perfectly fun. And so I did that for, like I said, about 10 years or so. Then I came here, and with that on my what we say CV. I don't remember what we say in Canada. In the U.S., people usually say resume. But with that on my resume, I was able to come into the newsroom here. There's two stations, basically two channels here, and so it was either TVNZ, which was on channel one, or TV3, and TV3 was kind of the brat. TVNZ had been here for many years, and then the brat came in the '80s, and I thought if I'm going to work for any station, it's going to be the brat. And so I came and I started in their newsroom, and just it was a perfect thing. You know, those amazing moments sometimes, John, where it's like this could not have been a better show for me because
Right.
I'd been in the newsroom at 6 p.m. your standard news time. And then suddenly the show comes around and they're looking for people with a comedy background that could do news. And you
Right.
saw the whole newsroom look around like, that's nobody here. And then all the eyes landed on me because I had done stand up comedy. I had been
Exactly.
a radio person, and it was perfect for me. And so I did that for 7 years, and we just wrapped up the 7 years of the show. We wrapped up just last week.
And now what is next?
What is next is full time author. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing now. I'm writing books full time. You can see some of them behind me, but I've been doing this for about 5 years, and I've been lucky for the most part, or paranoid. I don't know what it is. When I was in stand up comedy, um, it was amazing when I first started, early '90s in Minneapolis, and it was just you'd go out and you really had to hone it, right? You get out there, you do your 3 minutes, and 3 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but stand up in front of a crowd for 3 minutes,
It's a long time.
you have to make them laugh. That 3 minutes can feel like an eternity.
Right.
But I was able to get that up to 20, 25, 30 minutes and do middling some headline gigs. But then network television started to realize how cheap that programming was. If they could just, instead of people going to clubs, why don't we just get a fake brick wall, a microphone, put a guy or a woman in front of it, and we just put that on TV. And so in the mid '90s or so, you saw A&E, Food Networks, every VH1, MTV, everybody had a stand-up comedy show. So people thought, well, why pay my $10 and two drink minimum to go to a comedy show? I'll watch it on
Exactly.
TV. So fewer and fewer people start showing up. So I got into radio, and then once radio, when all the big corporations started coming in buying up radio, because I was in radio for I don't know, about a decade or so, and all these huge organizations were coming in snatching up, and so they started owning 2 3,000 4,000 5,000 radio stations, and you know the result of that, it waters down the product. And so
Exactly.
I could see that. I was like, I need to get out, got into television. And then I saw sort of the demise of television happening, not total demise, but a real paradigm shift about a year or two ago. And I told my wife, I said, this is changing. The ratings don't matter anymore. And so I started preparing myself for this full-time career in writing books, where I am now.
So, which is interesting, Dick, is that a couple of observations that to be, a lot of people say to be a speaker professionally is quite a challenge because people fear public speaking in a lot of cases more than death. To add to that, to be funny, it's even more of a challenge. And as you already said earlier, if you have to do it for 3 minutes and then progressing to half an hour, and then be funny and maintain your ability to entertain a crowd. And I know it from my own. I'm also a public speaker and do a lot of speaking and not necessarily by design funny, but I try to introduce that into it, but I love it, and then, but some people have the talent, others don't, and then if you can build the courage to do it and then have the gift of being able to do it, think quick on your feet and be prepared for all circumstances because everything will happen. You never know what it is and you have to be prepared for it. Your gift likely was being that you already were quite involved in radio and in television, and so standing there in front of cameras and indirectly or directly the public was not something that came new to you, but already something that was part of your career. And obviously, you're a very effective communicator. That's already very obvious in the way you have been speaking with me already. So,
Well, with stand up, that was my first foray. Again, going the hardest way possible, right? That was my
right.
first foray into that. And what that was I had been doing some writing, short story writing. And this is back in the day of when pre-internet, when we used to send out our stories to a magazine, Amazing Stories or something like this, and you used to have to send them out in the mail, and then you had to include what we
Yeah.
called an SASE, self-addressed stamped envelope,
Yeah.
and then you wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks for it to come back. And
Yeah.
so I was getting some rejections, as you do, and I had the nonsensical idea, but it made sense in my head, I guess. If I wrote something in the afternoon and got on stage, then I would be published that night, my version of published.
Right.
And so that's how I got into stand-up comedy, was a desire to write. And
Right.
so I didn't honestly have a great desire to be on stage, but I would write jokes in the afternoon. And I tell you what, that the first time I got up, I did it at an open mic in a place called the Valley, which was this dive bar in Minnesota. And I must have been like 19 years old, and all the hippies there with their guitars, and they're like, okay, open. Oh, we've got us. Oh, we have a comedian joining us." They had to move the microphone up because
Right.
everybody else had been sitting down playing guitar. And I got up there and I did about 5 minutes, and most of it was silence, except for one moment. One moment I got a laugh. And I tell you what, that was enough, at least enough to convince me, or if I was naive enough to think, if I can make this entire crowd laugh just that one time, I just need to take all that other stuff that didn't work, keep the stuff that does work, that one joke, and expand from there.
Yeah.
And that made sense to me, and I sort of built from there. And that laugh gave me just enough of confidence to go on.
So, and myself as a professional speaker, I know that once you get to a certain point, you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to have confidence that you can do it so you don't freeze. There may be hiccups here and there, and you have to manage your way through it. Being funny about it is helpful, but the public will see. What I always find is that, correct me if I am wrong, is that making a presentation, which I do, you do, people usually will not remember much of that, but what they will remember is the person and the way they delivered the presentation. They will remember
Right.
that part.
Yeah, I really think that, and I've done some public speaking as well, obviously, but like when it comes to stand up comedy, I think there's a misconception, like with hecklers, for example.
Right.
Everybody in that audience paid to get there, or in a case of a public speaking event, everybody is there to learn, or at least the boss told them they needed to be there. But they're on your side. They want you to do well.
Yeah.
It's not an antagonistic relationship.
No.
Yeah, you get hecklers every now and then, or you get detractors, whatever it might be. But those can actually be pretty good, because if you can turn them around, if you can take their legs out a bit, then the crowd loves that because
Make
they
them work
want you
with
to
you.
succeed.
Exactly.
100%. Yeah. But yeah, it's not easy to get up in front of a crowd of people and making them laugh, and there has to be some element of delusion. But I think there's a lot to be said for at least looking like you know what you're doing.
Right.
I mean, you know the old line of "fake it till you make it." It really
Yeah.
is about confidence. And
Yeah.
if you get on stage, and even if you have to feign confidence, there's an irony to that in a way. You fake confidence, people will believe in you, which
Exactly.
then gives you confidence. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, if you're terrified to get up on stage, pretend you're not. Pretend you're somebody else. I don't know what it might take, but
Yeah.
but get that in your head that you can do this. Of course, you can do this because you're actually Ryan Reynolds. You know who you are. Go out there and do
Exactly.
that, and that confidence will come.
So that's still part of your life in a sense, although, but the most different things that you started to do is started writing books, and I have also books. I'm an author. I've written 3 books. I have them all here in front of me. I'll share them with you in a minute. And and writing books is not easy. And you had quite a bit of experience already by being involved in writing presentations or essays or whatever to draw attention to it. And so did writing of books become easy for you, or did it take another new process that you had to kind of acquire the skills for? How did you go about it?
Yeah, I wrote my first book when I was 17, and it was terrible. It was meant to be burnt, set on fire. It was so bad. But you do get better every time you write something. And of all things, I think a lot of the creativity that I have, if I can be so bold to say that, is I have narcolepsy, which means that I am tired all the time. And even now, as I speak to you, I have to focus right now, right onto you, John, because if I don't, my mind starts to wander. And when they can seem as a bit of a negative, I describe it this way for people. I said, you know that moment where you're falling asleep and you get all those amazing creative ideas where you're between that sleep and wake world. You think that's I got to do that. That's an amazing idea. I'm going to write that down. Then you wake up in the morning and you don't remember it. You didn't write it down. You don't remember it anymore. Well,
Yeah.
I'm in that state about 80% of my day, and so
So
that gives me
how do you call that, Dick?
do I what?
So how do you call that? You had a name for it.
Narcolepsy.
Narcoleptic. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
narcolepsy. And I consider narcolepsy. I consider it a superpower. I'll be honest.
Right.
It was something that is can be debilitating because you get really tired. And there was definitely a time, I would say, my entire time at CNN, because that's swimming with sharks. I never told anybody there I had narcolepsy. But I learned over the years that if I let people around me know, hey, listen, I have narcolepsy every now and then, I'm going to fade away. It's
Yeah.
not that what we're talking about isn't interesting, is that it's just part of the condition that I have. And
Right.
bring people sort of into that, not in a sympathy, but in empathy, so that they know this is something that that is going to be part of our conversation.
So it became an asset to you, actually.
Yeah.
In which way?
Well, because as I say, because the creative nature of it. Because when I was first diagnosed with it, I actually hadn't even gone to get diagnosed. My ex-wife, she was a bit of a hypochondriac, and not trying to be mean, but she would go on all the time for various things. One of the things she thought she had was narcolepsy, and she was speaking to the doctor, and I was leaning up in the door jamb, talking, giving input where it was necessary from me. And the doctor stops and he goes like, "I don't think you have narcolepsy, but I think he might." And I went, "What?" And so they went, and the following week they put all little suckers on my face, and I lay down, and they woke me up every hour, gave me a little bit of a quiz, and sure enough, I found out I had narcolepsy, and that was a huge advantage initially to some extent because now I have a bit of a name for the demon. I know what this thing is. It isn't just being lazy or tired all the time. It's something that's always going to make me tired. And in the beginning, I was really probably a little bit negative about it. But
Right.
then I started to realize that it also gave me this, as I say, a bit of that daydream. And so through that daydreaming of being able to create, I've got 2 series of books. My latest series is behind me, and my other series, 8 out of 9 books, and a lot of that came from the creativity of that. Because you've probably had something similar. I've had people come up to me and just say like, "How do you come up with your ideas?" And it's like, "Well, I'm staring off into space usually." I wish I had a better answer. But
Right.
that's so narcolepsy has become a font of creativity for me, and so yeah, I see it as a superpower. It gives me the ability to write stories that other people wouldn't. No one else is going to write the stuff I'm going to write.
So narcolepsy is, I'm not familiar with it. I've never heard of it. So how
Right.
frequent is the occurrence of that? Is it,
It's constant. And,
yeah,
yeah. And so
and how many
it's
people?
uh it's not tons. In fact, I don't know. Like Jimmy Kimmel, for example, the late night host, he's an narcoleptic. You can almost see from the bags under his eyes. It's not really common, um, and I won't even hazard a guess. And I don't know if I've ever met. It's not like it comes up in conversation. I don't know if I've ever met and we talked about narcolepsy with somebody else, but it's something that they're not entirely sure what causes it. It doesn't seem to be genetic. I think it might be an autoimmune thing. There's some evidence that it might come from a viral infection, which I won't get into, but it's really fascinating if you look into it. But yeah, it's something that I'm always managing, and there's medication for it. You can take one medication you take is modafinil, and that it doesn't do much other than you sort of sometimes forget you're tired. It doesn't wake you up, but you kind of forget you're tired sometimes. And then the other stuff is using stuff like Adderall or Ritalin, but that amps you up, and I don't like that because I'm a Canadian, and that'll make me angry. And
Right.
Canadians don't like to be angry when it's not in our nature, and so I don't
Yeah.
take.
So the and you likely know that already. That if you looked at my bio, is that I'm ADHD.
Right,
And you're familiar with ADHD, likely.
of course.
And I wrote. Let me show you one of my books here. So I wrote this. This is the first book that I wrote, Against All Odds, and so I'm more than anything probably a storyteller. I do that in my presentations that I do. I do that. My writing style is I'm a storyteller. This is an autobiography, as you know. I thought about it for. I lived it for 80 years. I'm 83. I thought about it for 20 years, and it took me 2 years to write it. Autobiography, as you all know, you said it from the first book that you wrote when you were 17, that you pretty well have to do it right the first time. You cannot say, I'll throw that and I'll do another one. Yeah, this is the autobiography, this is the one that you got. So I got this, and
Right.
it's not about hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is, but it's going through all the ups and downs. And I was born in Holland in 1940 during the Second World War, and still remember a lot about that when I was 4 and 5 years old. The bombers overhead, they saw far too much that we should not have seen, and we were liberated by the Canadian Army. I was from northeastern Holland. The extreme northeast was about 15 minutes from the German border, and we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so that was my dream. And then the other dream that I had, I was not very successful in academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. They said, okay, what are we going to do with this guy? Maybe we'll send him to the mentally challenged school, or do we get him a trade? Fortunately, my
Right.
parents were very good people, and they chose to get me a trade. And I really much liked lumber and everything that had things to do with it, so I became a furniture maker. And then I got the other dream of going to Canada, and the other dream that I had is to build my own lumber mill. And so I was going to go when I was 17, but they wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force and was there for 30 months. And then when I was 23, I went to Canada to build my own lumber mill, and I had felt that I had failed because all the students that I went to school with and that were my age had gone on to college and then university, and I became a laborer. I'm very proud of that now, but then I wasn't, and I had to prove to myself that I could do things as well as everybody else did, and got diplomas. In Holland, it is so that if you want to be successful in a job and at some point you get married and a career and you want to own a house, then if you get a job, they're going to say, "Where are your diplomas?" Well, I didn't have any diplomas. And so I kind of felt that I had to start all over again. And the way to do that is totally remove myself from Holland, come here to Canada, in particular BC is where all the timber is in Canada, and it's a beautiful province. And then with the dream of building my own lumber mill. And I came here in July 1965 with one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and and I left Amsterdam with $150. And by the time I got to Vancouver, I could speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. And fortunately, I ran into a fellow that was at a German background, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. And he said, I was in Vancouver, he said, go to Prince George. That's the boomtown. It's about, for those people from around the world watching us, about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers. BC is a big province, and and Prince George is in the center, east to west as well as north to south. It's about the same distance. 800 kilometers, halfway either way, and so it's a big province. So I landed here in July of 1965, and I had my suitcase, and with my 3 books and the 2 sets of clothes, I landed here about 3 blocks away from here at the Greyhound station.
Yeah, right.
And I had in my pocket $25.47. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. But what I did have is attitude, avoid the negative. I had passion with all the things that I do, and work ethic. I work harder than anybody, and what will follow is success. So all those years later, I now have lumber companies and a number of other companies, but along the way, and this comes down to what you indicated, with your challenge, and this, I don't know the name exactly anymore,
Narcolepsy.
Epilepsy, that you have.
Narcolepsy with an N.
Epilepsy. So it took me 32 years to walk into a store here and picked up a book, and I opened the book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. And as I opened the book, it was about ADHD. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. So I bought the book. I wrote in the book, now in Dutch actually, because there was stigma attached to it. It was considered to be potentially a mental disorder. Not anymore now, but then it was, at least not by many people now. And, and found out more and more about it, and then got diagnosed about 5 years later, and by my doc. By then I was 62, and the more I learned about it, the more I started speaking about it, in fact, and then wrote a book about it. And the book that I wrote is ADHD Unlocked.
Right.
And I call it, like you do, a superpower. I could not have done the things that I've done, being author, be a public speaker, have successful companies, and then obviously be a very proactive and active podcaster as well, unless I had ADHD. So people say to me, how do you do all those things? 83 years old, you should be retired and all the other things. No, I said, I still work 60 hours a week at least, if not more. And the reason that I can do all these things is because of ADHD. That's the
Right.
reason. And, so, and from that came, once I found out that it was ADHD, that changed everything for me in terms of looking back and not feeling that I had failed. Because even during the time that I was here initially, it was not until 32 years after I landed here in Prince George that I found that I had ADHD. During that whole period before that, I still thought everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful and so this and that," but I didn't feel that way. I still felt then that I had failed, and it was that ADHD unlocked all of that for me and changed a lot of things. And then from there and then, I became an author. I've done 3 books now. This one is the autobiography, Against All Odds. Very successful, actually. And then the other one, ADHD Unlocked. And the other one that's been important to me is that a lot of people, what they do, they don't like what you're doing. I saw a program the other day, actually, I think it was on CNN, where he said in the United States that 70% of the people that work don't like their jobs. And maybe up to
Yeah.
75% that don't like their jobs are looking for new jobs. And a lot of times
Right.
when I do presentations to young people, in particular, saying, what are you going to do as a career? I say, well, I don't know, and a lot of people feel like, oh, what I'm doing I don't like. I say, change, you know. And so I felt I had to write a book about it. I did. And it's finding your passion, living the dream. And a fair question would be to say, okay, John, are you then living the dream? I am. I love every day that I work and all the things that I do and through all the ups and downs, and I do, and so that part is very important. So the point that I'm making is that as it was with you, what changed my life and my world is that when I found that I was ADHD, and then the more I communicated about it, the more I found out about it, is that, initially it was thought that about 8% of the population are affected by ADHD. Now it is
Right.
believed by me and others that it is probably well more than 20% of the population.
I
And
wouldn't be surprised by that.
yeah, and so, but it is, as you said, a superpower.
And I think there's another. I'd be fascinated to ask you this, if I may. So I've got my narcolepsy. You have ADHD. You create things or created things, lumber that you sent out into the world. I create books that I sent out into the world. I'm just fascinated to know, if do you realize the dreams that you help build? Is that something that's conscious to you? Because you gave the building materials for people's homes, or potentially factories or businesses or cabins, whatever it might be. Without what you were doing, there's a chance that those people either wouldn't have had that home, or maybe would have gotten it somewhere else. But does that ever cross your mind that that right now there's someone living in a place that they love, and the reason that they're in that place is because of you? Does that ever come to mind?
Well, it does in a way. I've always loved the trade. That's why I ended up in becoming at 14 a furniture maker, and I loved what I was doing. And then my dad was involved managing a small lumber company, and then my grandfather, after which I was named, was a master carpenter that he died at about 40, so I never knew him, but I knew him by the work that he had done, especially in churches, the amazing pieces that he had produced, and I always admired them for that. And then the other advantage that I had, Dick, when my normal formal schooling didn't really work for me because of attention issues, I was a dreamer. Most of the times that I was not interested in what they were doing, and for all intents and purposes, I was not there. And that if they talked to me after the school came out and saying, "What did you learn today?" I say, "I have no idea." And I lived in a different world, and but it became more interesting, and I gave everything to my career in becoming involved in lumber already in Holland, and I was already quite successful there in terms of working for one of the largest importing lumber companies in Holland, and then felt I had to start from scratch, from nothing here. With my $25.47, I did build a mill. Within a year and a half that I was here, I was the superintendent of one of the largest lumber mills here in the Prince George and northern BC. And then from there on in, I've been very, very involved the last 60 years here in northern British Columbia, and I believe I'm very good at what I'm doing, and I make unique products that other people don't make, and became very innovative in the things that I do. And that comes to the point that you are making. The same with my books, is that they are unique and are helpful to people that that read about my story, and even with all the challenges along the way, may it be PTSD from the war years, or the inner child, fearing of losing the only parent that I had at the time, and all those other things, and even then staying the course, and being successful in making presentations and doing very well at it and on the books, and then the companies that I run. Yes, very much so. That that when I write the books, I give it all that I got, and I think about it that not so much as to will it make me a lot of money, more in terms of will it help others, and that to me is very important. And a lot of them I give away
And as
simply.
you rose up too, I was going to ask,
Pardon?
as you rose up too and continue to rise up, because, as my author business grows larger and larger, you get detractors. You get people that take swipes at you. They could be other authors. It could be, like I mentioned, I just got done with a television show a bit ago. And I've actually, myself, I've found a way to sort of use them in my life. I'm fascinated to know, for somebody who's grown as much as you have from scratch and done so well, how did you approach detractors when? Because I think it's going to be people either listening or watching this that are trying to grow something, that they have their passion and they're trying to race forward with it. But there's people that take their legs out or try to take their legs out, take swipes at them. So what do you think that is? Well, how do you handle people that are trying to take you down a peg?
Yeah. So what I do is I always say credibility is indefensible, because your friends know and your adversaries you cannot convince. So I don't waste my time on them. And then the other one is that in terms of that if there are differences of opinion about issues, then I'm not argumental in terms of and people like to say from time to time is are you successful because you're lucky, and I usually say the harder you work, the luckier you get. So that's kind of the way it works, right? So and I say go back to this: attitude, passion, work ethic, and I follow that. That's my foundation. What I usually do is even now at 83, I usually wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and I always think I'm late, so I'm in a hurry getting up. I always make my bed. That's probably from my army years back, and then the every day to me is exciting, and there are challenges along the way. But in terms of detractors, I don't have time for them. They are usually people that have frustrated, are not very happy with the things that they do, and so and and what's
I
the
have
point?
used them to get you. You mentioned getting up early. I've actually, because being in television, that is some type A plus personalities. And I never talked about my book stuff when I was in that world, and there were plenty of people that were willing to diminish that sort of thing that I was doing. And I'm like you, even with the narcolepsy. Narcolepsy sometimes comes hand in hand with insomnia, so I got both of those. But I would wake up at about 3:30. This morning, I woke up at 4:10. And I don't do this as much anymore, but especially in the beginning when I was fighting, like, do I really want to chase this writing thing? I'm already working 60 hours a week at my
Yeah.
job. I would remember, and this is my way. I don't know if others would do the same, but I would think about what some of those detractors would say. I think about those snide comments. I would think about their little digs, and where it didn't seep into me, I would think, I want to prove them wrong. I want to make sure that I'm doing something that they're going to eat those words. And sometimes when you're struggling, you got to pull yourself out of bed at 4 a.m. I use them to get my butt out of bed and get me sitting in this chair, and that
Yeah,
has empowered. And
yeah.
so I say, bring on the detractors. If you're going to take swipes at me. Those mean far less now with some of the success I've had, but in the beginning especially, bring it on. Say
Yeah.
something negative because that's going to get my butt out of bed tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock in the morning to do this.
And I feel the same, Dick. And then the other part that I probably was my own worst critic because I
Yeah,
believed that I had failed. And I wanted to prove to me that I was just as good as the other friends that had gone to college and university and kind of, in a way, looked down on me because I became a laborer. But I didn't want to prove nothing to them. I wanted to prove it to me. And obviously, it's always amazing that a lot of them have followed me. And since you and me are now talking to the public globally, really, because podcasting has become a medium that is amazing, where two individuals that had not met each other on either side of the world are having a discussion like we just met in the restaurant, and we have things in common and we become friends in the process. How can you possibly find anything like that? Because before that, it has gone precisely the opposite. Everybody's caught up in the new medium that people interacting like we are doing right now has substantially disappeared. But podcasting has done not only for the two individuals or whatever number there are involved directly, but for the other people watching it that can sit there and are part of this conversation, because it is so interesting. Two different personalities from across the world and having so many similarities has become, that's what makes podcasting so successful. And we know, and we have had over months, millions of people are watching the podcasting, and and uh, and I find it amazing, and I love it.
yeah, I love the technology. It's funny because I mentioned the differences it was like back in the '90s in writing. These days, it's so different than it was before. You're also more open to other people coming in, but I get Facebook messages every day. I get obviously emails from people, but I interact with people all day long online. I even have one of my favorite sort of stories about this is I was beginning book three of my Kane series, and I was speaking to it was a UK group, and there was a woman, and as I would, so I would take breaks from my writing, and I'd sit and I would have every now and then a discussion with some readers who wanted to talk about the book, and so I had this conversation with this group in the UK, and I always say that this woman was from New Brighton. I'm not sure why she may have said that, but that stuck in my head, or maybe I just think it sounds cool. But so I part of my brain was going like, I got to work out what I'm going to do in book three because I've been doing that all morning trying to work out what the next steps were going to be. And this woman from New Brighton said to me like that she really loved the books and there's such a fascinating idea. And she goes like, and I can't wait to find out more about Kane, like how he grew up because this was it's a crazy sounding story. A wolf that got bitten by an infected man that turns into a teenage boy. Then over the next year, he grows 10 years. He becomes a 6'7" French Canadian. That sounds crazy. But she was really fascinated by this idea. Like, what was that like that year that he spent out on the farm in British Columbia with his couple? Those
Right.
formative year with this guy. And it was so funny because that interaction, when she said that, I was like, that's exactly what I'll be doing in book three. It's you've called it. That's what I'm doing. I'm going back, and
Exactly.
I'll be talking about his past. But it was that sort of interaction, that conversation, that she helped inspire the next stage of the story. And so, what a
Exactly.
neat thing that is for me. It helped solve a bit of a plot problem, but it's neat to be able to bring people that are passionate about what you're doing in. And I've reached out to her since and thanked her for that. And I sent her a free copy of the book and I signed it and everything. But it's the sort of thing that it's neat to have people outside being a part of this process. Now, that's not something you would have 30 years ago. I love it.
No.
I love the idea.
Y-
I love this. Not necessarily into like collaboration. Let's all get together and do this. But if you got something interesting, shoot it at me. I love those ideas, and then we can make something even better because someone's going to sit down and read this in Vancouver or New Brighton or Sydney, and they're going to get a bit of joy out of it. And that joy is
ex-
going to be so much better for book three because that woman in New Brighton spoke up and said that one thing about that. So
and
that's neat.
stimulated you to the inspiration came from her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which is a little bit like what you were saying earlier, being sort of open. You have to
yeah,
be open to the inspiration. There's something
exactly.
about being this is my little toy, and I don't want
Yeah,
anybody else to mess with it. But how
right.
many opportunities, I don't know about you, but in my life, that opportunities came or inspiration had come, and I have just had to learn to go like, okay, let's go with that. Let's see where that
Yeah,
might go. I've
yeah.
had some of my greatest successes that I never even planned, that I hadn't even that door, I didn't even know that door was there, and the door flings open and somebody shouts something out. We go, let's go that way for a minute. And
Yeah,
so I think you really have to sort of trust in the world around you and be brave enough or naive enough to embrace that inspiration. It's not always going to work out, but every now and then it works out in spades.
I feel the same, Dick, and for the same reasons as you do. Is I'm always alert to that and things that happen around me that may change my mind or my direction, and always looking for new areas. Now, coming back to your books, the first one was Cain,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the book. What is it about?
So I gave you a little bit of it a moment ago, and I won't drone on about it. But
Yeah,
basically, the story is you could describe it as it's humorous because I come from a
right,
humorous background. More than
right,
anything, it's a fun book.
right,
But I wouldn't qualify it as being like it's about a guy who's a werewolf, but it's not a monster book. I'm honest. I'll be honest. I don't read monster books. I've read
right,
one, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm not a monster, but
right,
the werewolf thing or the supernatural thing gives me a bit of an avenue. It gives me a mechanism that I can bring these two very different people together. He is a former wolf, now a human, who in the moonlight becomes a werewolf. And then she is this part time criminal who is looking for a way out of that life. And the thing about Kane is, since he was a wolf, he can speak French and he can speak English. And he sort of gets to know the world around him a bit. And so there are chapters where we see the human world through his eyes, which people seem to really get a kick out of. But the one thing he can't work at is driving. And part of that is just because he used to be a wolf, and those sort of motor skills aren't available to wolves. They don't need to do that. So this is how Imelda comes in. And so Imelda used to be, among other things, a getaway driver. So she's the perfect person to do this for him. So she ends up being a driver for him. But through this story, these two, they become friends. And there's a phrase I've heard people use in the past. It's called found family. And so, it's not a romantic relationship. They're just friends and they begin to rely on each other. And as these friends come together, both the world would take a look at. My wife always says this, that I write about my thematic style is I write about people that a lot of people don't consider. People might sort of push aside. They're not heroes. They're not, brilliant titans of industries. They're just people that are kind of messed up in a way, like all of us. But
right.
given the right opportunities and given the right sort of
Exactly,
support, like these two have with each other, you can become heroes. And so that's what
exactly.
the story is. So these two come together through the story and their adventure to find more about this guy who bit him to find out the secret so he can become a wolf again.
And so, where was the setting for that? Was it in Canada?
So the first book takes place in Minneapolis, and then the
Okay.
second book, because as I mentioned, he grew up or grew up for that year. He grew up in near Kitimat, and so the second book, a large part of the second book takes place up in British Columbia.
Is that right behind you? No, I can't quite see it. It's
Yep.
right behind you.
So
That
yeah, book
and
two.
that,
Yep,
yeah,
and
big two.
yep,
Yeah,
that's that one there. That one takes. Oops, hold on. There you go. That one takes
yeah.
place in British Columbia.
Okay.
But
And
and the fun part for me, I just got the news here in the last week, is that a group called Podium Audio. They're one of the big audiobook producers. Because I know a lot of people are very busy and don't have time to read it. Podium Audio is going to turn this into an audiobook, and it comes out mid-January. So,
Okay.
so that is going to be exciting because I have two people. It's going to take it next level because a story that I wrote at 4 o'clock in the morning in a two-car carpeted garage in Auckland that two actors out of Los Angeles are going to put all their skills into and bring this blockbuster movie of the mind together on Audible, and I'm thrilled by it. I can't wait to hear what they do with it. I'm going to be kind of emotional when I listen to it because it's going to be fascinating to see how they bring that world to life.
Is that have they done the same as the first book that you did, or is the second
Yeah,
one
so
the Audible?
all three of them are going to be coming out, and then probably four and five. So the
Yeah.
first one comes out January 16th,
Okay.
which is, so might already be out by the time the podcast goes out. But January 16th is the first one, and then February is going to be the second. Then the probably in March is going to be the third. So it's
So
going to
the
be great.
third
I can't wait.
one is right behind your microphone. There is
Yep.
titled. What is the title of that? The
So that one's
yeah
unhinged. They all have.
yeah
I can move out. You can almost see it.
yeah.
So it's Kane, then it's Kane Unleashed, Kane Unhinged. The next book coming out, the fourth one's going to be Kane Unchained. I stitched myself up, as the Kiwis say. Once I put the "un" in the first one, I felt like I had to keep that going.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the third book itself, not the audiobook, but the third book itself comes out at the end of December.
So they are
Um,
all
yep.
available on all the major media, correct?
It's on Amazon, but you can get the paperback almost anywhere.
Right. And then the Audible is available on all the major media as well. And then you're
It's going
doing
to be
the fourth one and the fifth one. So
yeah.
you're working now
So
on
I'm
the
just
fourth.
starting the
Yeah,
fourth one.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, the
and
fourth.
and it's funny because I'm what's called a discovery writer or a pantser.
Right.
So when the fourth one ended, so a pantser or a discovery writer is somebody who writes. I plot the books out, but then once the characters sort of take form, I know how flaky this sounds. Once the characters take form, they start to tell me where the story is going, and they
Yeah.
start to feed me some of what they're thinking. I don't hear
Yeah.
voices, but I do feel this,
They
and
are
then at the end of
alive.
three, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so at the end of
Yeah.
book three, suddenly they say, "Hey, this is what's going to be happening next." And so that's what I'm
Yeah.
writing now, inspired
Yeah.
by the subconscious creatures in my head.
Yeah. So give me your. So you're now retired from being active on radio, TV. You're totally focused on being an author. So
Yep.
that takes discipline, right? So in terms
Yeah.
of how do you manage that part of it? You get up at whatever, and then you write from then to then. So how do you structure your time?
So for whatever reason, it might be a symptom of being an old radio jock because I did morning radios for so many years. But I'm most creative in the morning, and
Right.
so I get up in the morning. I'll often, at least 4 or 5 days a week, I go to the gym. We've got a 24-hour gym. Even if at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll go to the gym because I have found something about having more than just this. And what I mean by that is like when the books, let's say the sales, because they fluctuate, they always
Yeah.
fluctuate. And I found that my mood fluctuated with the same amount of the sales do. It's almost like it was like an emotional rhythm. And so having going to the gym or something like that and seeing some of those goals and seeing some of those gains, that is something that I can also be into. So I guess for anybody listening or watching, if you're passionate about that one thing, I would just suggest, as my own opinion, have something else, have something else. Maybe it's going to be painting, or maybe it'll be could be ballroom dancing. Have something else, because if you put 100% of your emotional investment into one thing, those highs are going to be high and those lows are going to be devastatingly low. But so
Yeah.
I get up in the morning and I spend the first couple of hours writing, and then after that I spend another couple of hours marketing because a lot of writing, I mean, passion is writing, but the job is selling books. And so I
Exactly.
spent a lot of time doing Facebook ads or Amazon ads. I do interviews. I send out newsletters. I
Did you,
speak
did
with
you
people all the time.
did you hire a distributor to do that for you, the marketing? How do you get them on the at the WalMarts or the Costco's or those kind of places?
So that just takes a little bit like you. I'm a workaholic, and
Yeah.
so one of the things about getting up that early in the morning, I did spend a portion of that time writing, and there's a point creatively where your brain starts to go like, I can't do this anymore, and
Right.
so I started googling around and searching for people that had done this in the past.
Right.
And also this idea about reach out to other people. Of all the folks I've spoken to, like successful authors, other best-selling authors, some won't get back to you, but I've never had anyone ever say to me, anybody who's had any success, I've never had anyone say, no, I'm not going to tell you that. All of them
Exactly.
seem really open to bringing you in.
Yeah.
So it may seem like if you're in a particular industry, you think like, let's say you're an actor, you think, oh, I shouldn't bother that person. Bother that person. They cannot
Exactly.
get back to you. Maybe they may not get back to
Exactly.
you. But you'll be surprised. Like if somebody came to me, and anytime somebody comes to me, he says, "Hey, listen, I'm trying to write a book. How do I do that?" I always give them my opinion about it. And if they
Exactly.
write something, if I have an opportunity, I'll take a look and I'll try and read some of it if I can, if I have that in my day. So
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with going out and seeking a bit of help. But that's how I learned about doing some of the marketing, getting the paperback stuff going, because there's a couple different ways to do that. Because my books are available in like Walmart's and Barnes and Nobles and places like that. A lot of it is online until you order it. But
Right.
a lot of that just came from Googling around, finding people who've done it, and ask them how they did it. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
No. That's what I say too about entrepreneurship. Especially when I speak to younger people or people that are thinking about entrepreneurship, is say, or people that looking find their passion or find things that they like. Talk to people that are working in a industry. Get to become knowledgeable. A lot of people that are successful, in some way or fashion, love to share that with others. Don't be afraid to contact them, and you'd be amazed.
Yep, I
So
agree 100%.
So then, that being said, so as you kind of look forward, the certainly being an author has been already in your blood right from the time that you were 17, really, and so that likely is something that has become your life in a way. Podcasting, you're very active in podcasting as well.
I don't have a podcast yet. I've had a number of people that have asked me to do some podcasting. I'd love to be able to do some of that. I haven't yet, but I've done, like I said, I did radio and television for years. I'd like to be able to do it at some point. And if anybody wants to partner, maybe that could be something I do down the road. But at the moment, I'm trying to write novels. I do like
Right.
speaking with amazing people like yourself around the world. So
Right.
for now, at this point, that's the side I'm doing, and it's a blast. I have so much fun talking with people all over the world.
Yeah. So the being a guest is interesting, and being podcasted. We quite involved with Podmatch, and that brings people together from either those that do podcasting or our guest hosting our guest, I guess. And but it's still evolving as we speak, and I see huge potential in those areas. But the whole communication side, the books for me, I hope to write at least one book a year, and I very much enjoy it. And once you get used to it, and then know that people from the other side of the world are interacting with you in books that you have written, then that's amazing and quite an experience.
It's amazing. It is really amazing to be able to touch somebody like that, where somebody will say, and I've had this happen many times. Some say, "Oh, I was having a difficult time. My father was really sick, and this thing was happening at home. But I knew each time I'd come home and these characters were waiting for me. I could get into their world, and even when things got really hard for them, I knew they'd work it out. And so, the idea that you can give somebody that is for me is the greatest joy in the world. That
Yeah,
yeah, make them laugh or give them a moment of happiness, whatever it might be. but it was a bit of a respite for somebody. And I
Yeah.
had an email just last week where somebody said something very similar to that, that this was their break in the day, that they sort of, I don't, just fell into this world and let it surround them as they read the book, and it was what they needed to get through the day. And that's an amazing thing to be able to. I suppose they're giving that to me, but I'm trying to give that to them as well.
Yeah, and I had the same experience, and it is very rewarding, either in presentations that we do, or in writing, or for that matter, the same in podcasting that I found. You know, Dick,
Because it's always about connection, right? I mean,
it
one of the
always,
greatest things in the world is about people connecting.
yeah, no question about that. And so, Dick, I really enjoyed our podcast, from the other side of the world. And New Zealand I've never been there, but I know it's beautiful. They have quite a forest industry and quite a forest as well. And it's an amazing country as well, so,
John, we got trees everywhere, brother. You should come here. Come join us. Come. We got a spare room in back. Come stay with us in Auckland.
I would like that, so we'll stay in touch, Dick. And again, thank you for being my guest on my podcast, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.